Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to, for this week, the second webinar. Very happy today to have David Singleton with us. David and I go back a long time. Before Microsoft invented the MVP program, we were online trying to help people when blogging was not invented and forums were for nerds, where people were using nicknames. Before marketing actually took over blogging as a commercial activity. David is going to give us a brief history of NAV, Navision, going back to DOS. We do have a lot of new people entering our ecosystem, and all of those new people are confronted with a huge code base. And I thought it would be very interesting to kind of give some background on where all of this started from. And David is probably the person next to guys like Michael Nielsen that go back to almost day one when everything started and when the code base became available for people to open. So before we start, before I give the floor to Dave, a couple of housekeeping things. As always, you can find new webinars on our website. You can find past webinars on the YouTube channel. If you have any questions, type them in the GoToMeeting questions window. If I think I should interrupt Dave, I will. If I think we can keep it to the end, I'll keep it to the end. And thanks to our sponsor, Liberty Growth Software. Rick Williams is always at the back listening in and helping us and organizing all of this stuff. And it's really highly appreciated that he's always doing that.
You can't see me, but I'm blushing now, Mark.
So with that, I'm going to give the floor to Dave. And Dave, you have the floor.
Okay. Oh, you can't see my screen. Sorry, hang on. It vanished. Right, we back?
Yeah, we're back.
Okay, so hello everyone. I hope you can all see this. So I'll just give a quick introduction to myself for those of you that don't know me. And let's put this up here. I'm not so good with PowerPoint, particularly don't like it. Basically, I've been in Navision since 1992. I started as an end user. I eventually got a job with PC&C, the company that owned Navision and Microsoft bought out. I then became I've been ISV partner, independent consultant, MVP for 12 years, from 2005 to 2016. And I specialize these days on business process reengineering, SQL optimization, partner readiness, and disaster recovery. So just a bit of a simple thing. Let's go on here. So those are the terms, that's not important. What I'm going to do here, this seminar isn't really supposed to be focusing on facts per se. I'm trying to basically go down and give you from an external point of view. When I was with PC&C and Microsoft, I was as a distributor, which means I didn't work for the head office. I worked as a distributor, so I've not been inside like people like Michael. So I'm giving this presentation from the view of someone outside in the real world, seeing all these changes and what happened and how it affected us and how it grew through. So I may say a few things here that are speculating because we didn't know all the facts. So if I'm wrong, I'd be very glad to hear it, so don't sort of take this as gospel, and if you do know differently, please let me know. It'd be nice to know. So we're going to cover basically everything up till 3-tier. We're not going into multi-tenant and 365. I'm not touching PC Plus because I never got involved in it, but these are the fundamental phases of Navision that I was involved in. I came just after PC Plus. I was involved with the OS2 mainly. Then we had Windows 95, SQL, a few things there you can all read on that list. So let's start. One of the things about Navision, it's worked really well with the Microsoft and as we see Apple as well, that these companies that actually can't count, not even from 1 to 10. So this is how Navision counted. We had PC Plus and version 2. Then these versions all went on, and I'll just note out a few phases in where the product went. So PC Plus, as I said, I've never used it. I've seen it, but that's about all. Single user accounting package sold in Denmark. They sold a lot of copies of it. 2.01 was a database version, and it had a basic report design and a few other features. But in terms of what we today know as Navision, 3.04 was really the one that put it on the map. So 3.04 and version 3.5 were the powerhouses of Navision. Now, we need to escape out of here. Yeah, okay, so here we go. So I don't have 3.04. I've installed, these are the versions, if we look on here, that I've installed. I haven't installed everything because there's quite a lot of similarities. So this is the old DOS version. This is where it all started and what made everything really quite special. Sorry, 1 second. So I'm just trying to get it on the screen here. Oh, come here. Sorry.
And this was the first version where you could actually program Cal, right? Before that,
yes,
it was closed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just looking for my slide. So, okay. So the last line of this PowerPoint here is the one that everybody keeps asking. How many lines of code? Well, I did actually count it when I got when we upgraded from 3.04 to 3.55. I went through, got all the code, pulled it all out, and there were roughly 7,000, I think it was like 7,200 or 7,300 lines of code in the entire product. That was the entire product. So that was an entire product with everything that, this is really, everything that we have come to know, if I can. 7,000 lines of code. Oops, let me just get this other version, sorry. Right, I want to make one apology here, and that is that the hardest part of this presentation by far was just getting all the databases installed. It really was quite a challenge. So I've limited what I've got, but ultimately the problem happens is that all the licenses in the old versions were date limited, and I'm sure that if anyone's Microsoft, they're going to be very upset to see this here, which I'm sure is not really what I should be doing, and I shouldn't be telling you about it. But anyway, my license basically expired. Yeah, my license expired some years ago, so it was the only one I can get. Unfortunately, my own developer license was only for Czech license. This number here is a telephone code for the country. So you can see this will be a US license, the one. This is a license. So unfortunately, when we go into this, the only way I can show you the code is by showing you in Czech language. So let's just have a quick look at the words don't really matter. For instance, code unit 80 or function 80. And if we look at this, I'll just put the cursor here and I'll do some page downs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 3, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 39, 40, 42, 45, 46, 52 times, 20 lines each. That's about not a lot. So as you can see, everything was pretty light and simple back in those days. It really did make it very easy. Now, one of the great things about a product that had so few lines of code is that I was having a vacation one time when I'd gotten in. I was trying to learn Navision, and the manuals were written in a language which is some derivative form of Danish with English words translated into it. And I decided I needed an easier way to learn Navision, so I actually printed out the entire code base. And on holidays, I just read the lines of just basically this whole lot. And
like a book.
Like a book. But it's hard to comprehend today that in those days you could actually read the entire code base from start to finish. And so, it meant that, yep.
Dave, I can see that the first function here is actually called code, and it still has the clear all. Do you have any idea where that clear all comes from?
Clear all? Clear all just basically resets all variables.
Yeah, but why? I always wondered why.
Oh, the reason was that if you're running this in a batch, then it would remember all of the fields. So if you're running reports, for example, you put a clear all. Posting. If you're posting, if a variable wasn't specifically initiated, then it would keep the value from the previous invoice. So if you're doing in batches, it could be. It's obviously bad practice because you should be initializing your variables, but it was there simply to clear it out because otherwise you would have had those errors. So nothing too complex about it. So it's a pretty simple little code base, very easy to understand. The code has not changed from version 3 till 2017. It's all the same. Test field is the same. The letters DB were added to anything which was a database operation. So code is much all the same. Even look, a window looks exactly the same, doesn't it? You put the same sort of structure into it, and there's not a lot changed here. A lot of comments and stuff. So that's basically how it all worked in the code. And if we get to code, let's just get back here because what I want to do is show you where this seminar started from. Someone asked a question, and the question was, this is bad, sorry that it's in Czech. What is going on here? Function 22, why is that? If we, this seminar started because someone was asking about a strange little quirk that we have in Navision, and it's lingered with us for quite a while, that if I go to code unit, oh no, did I just lose sound? No.
No, I can still hear you.
Yeah, sorry, USB just failed, that's all right. We have this structure here, item line, journal, copy rec, code, rec, item line. And there's been a lot of talking about why do we have this line? What is this for? What does it do? What is the purpose of copying it, putting it in, putting it out? And there are a lot of theories, but actually it was really, really simple. From the DOS version to the Windows version, there was an upgrade toolkit. Something like the upgrade toolkit from going from Windows 5 to 2009, where you could translate all of the code for pages and reports in, or codes, report forms to pages into 2009. You could basically translate code units and basically code and tables from DOS version to the Windows version. But in the DOS version, there is an implied with. So basically, with doesn't exist, but basically you could imagine that this says with item journal line do begin. Okay, so that's assumed here in the old version. So when they copied the code across, of course, in the upgrade toolkit, that doesn't work because we don't have a with. So they simply put this in here so that they could change this to the word rec, so they wouldn't have to edit the word rec in another variable. So that's the simple reason. There was no other real reason. The rest of them are just silly stuff. So a lot of these things, they look like they're really complex stuff. And this, we were told when this first came out that it was only for the it would only be in version 1 and 1.1 for the upgrade toolkit, and then it would be gone.
It's still there, and people think there's magic in it. It's like coding by fairy tales. Yeah. This
is the problem, is that these things stay there for no particular reason, and a lot of it is because of the upgrade toolkit. Now, a worse one is this. This is my all-time favorite. If we go into I can do this in the English version, American version here. If I go to, can I do this? Where do I do this? Companies. Sales receivables, reports. I have this list of reports, okay, and this is it just says that if I'm in here, I've got a report in my, where am I? I'm in sales and receivables, and I've got all of these reports here. If I go here into Navision, I go sales and receivables, I have reports, and I have the same thing, same reports. This is, I think you can see here just how identical the products are. You know, you can see it's the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
No particularly different. Now, there is a difference though, and it's a subtle one. But let me just go to my other report, my other version here. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm going to switch to Czech because I don't have a license in the other one. But if I look at reports, you'll see there's a list of reports, and they have a name. There's no number. So in the DOS version, only tables had numbers. When I go to tables, they have 27 item number, and windows and functions, but reports and batch jobs, imports, data ports were purely text. So to make life easy, they had to make the upgrade toolkit be able to handle that one little page. This has to be handled in the upgrade toolkit. So to do that, they allowed this to drill down onto the secondary field. If we look at the reports, obviously, primary index is ID, and name is a secondary field. Very strange thing to do, and what happened was this, and this is fun. You can try this in any version of Navision. If you go here and add a field, and we'll call that product, let's call it posting group. You can do this in any table. All you need to is data in there. And if you link this to any secondary key, not a primary key, because if we look at here, we would normally link this to number. But if instead of that, let's say I do this.
Description, yeah.
That is inventory posting group. No, I think it needs to be product. Let me use product posting group. What's going on here?
General product posting group.
Sorry?
General posting group. General product posting group.
I'm in wrong one. Sorry. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter any table here. Oh. Sorry. This worked plenty of times before. 12 and yes, it doesn't matter. That one won't work, but sorry. What's the secondary key? In this one, that'll do. Inventory posting group. And we get this funny error. Okay, it doesn't work. I can still type something in. But what a secondary issue with here, we all know that Navision has this wonderful ability to be able to rename records. Wonderful thing, except now you get this error, and it's trying to, obviously I've linked to the wrong key, I've linked to a secondary. The thing is that that is a completely unrelated table in completely unrelated field with no connection. And it was my first ever bug that I ever reported to Microsoft for after leaving them, because I left, and when I started my own company I was with Windows version. So when version 1.10 came out, I reported that as a bug, and you probably can believe me, but it works in 2009. You still get the exact same error. So 10 years later, it's still there. And it is this thing, that feature, that bug was put there only to be able to allow the upgrade toolkit, but it survived all those years. So there you go. If you want to try that, I won't, because it'll just use up too much time. But feel free to try that in 2009, and you'll see it's the same. So let's just go back and, sorry, yeah, here we go. Okay, so what made Navision, what made it really successful? The first things are that it came out of the box with a client-server multi-user database. You didn't have to try and handle your data at all. You could just simply do a find or a get and get data, and it would just handle. The database was very consistent. It had a mechanism in it that made sure that the data was either right or wrong. There was no unknown states. And all of this meant that all of these things together meant that the average person with very little programming skill, someone that had a good business knowledge, could become a Navision developer very quickly. And that made it grow very fast, because we had people getting out there, building this product up and making it something pretty spectacular. Now, when Mark asked me to do this presentation, I was thinking, there are so many problems with it, so many things that made it so complex over the years. There's just so much to go through. And what surprised me the most is when I sat down and actually went through all of these different issues about Navision. There really aren't that many things. The product is so simple that it really didn't have that much happening. So when I look back at this, all we've really done, we've got a lot of expansion, a lot of new things, but let's look at this basic product. We've got, sorry, let me just go in here. When I go into my general ledger, I can go into my chart of accounts and I can see a number and I can press F6 and I've got my totals. It really gives you a nice, you've got your drill down, you've got your flow fields. One of the things that we said, a lot of things stayed there with us forever. Other things vanished. This is one of the best, this red screen. Anybody that used the DOS version, this was the biggest complaint after upgrade, was that we lost this red screen. And the beauty of one of these is that it's all keyboard driven, but basically what would happen is when you create a red screen, they're just called a red screen, a ledger screen, basically the primary key would always be put into the left 2 columns. Then any flow fields that were attached to that key that you selected would go in here, and if you filtered, they would give you the current running total. So that means if I'm running in my GL and I'm looking in this account and I want to find a number, all I'm doing is pressing the left and right arrows, and Navision is filtering down, it's applying the filter, and you can see that this filter here, let's say we're on 11:15:95, it will move it up to here. Mark, you can see my mouse, right? Can you guys see my mouse?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
good,
I
good.
can.
Okay, so when I do this, boom, I now have that I am filtering account number 11100 and that date, and look at this nice thing, it says, well, I've got a flow field there, so I may as well calculate it, and it displays the number. Now,
and this totaling ends up in every suggestion session that we have with NAV users, and people still want it.
yeah, I mean, how many times you had a customer say, can you just put me a box here that displays the total of all the numbers on the screen?
Yep.
So it was one of the biggest questions. The performance was amazing on this. It used a flow field, so it was always using the high-speed technology, and it's been there since the very first version of Navision, and then one day it just vanished. It just completely, one day was gone, and the ability to do this, it means you could build let's say you build a production module, manufacturing module for your customer. You could have create a fairly large index on a table, and with just all I'm doing is pressing left and right keys, I can then filter and see numbers. I can search for a number. No, it wasn't on that date. Hang on, maybe it's this date here, and I can say, no, that's 12,000. I'm looking for 10,000. I can go forward and back. So, wonderful thing that we lost. So, I've got a few more of these I want to go through. Hang on. Oh, where's the rest? Sorry. And I'm sorry.
Which version of Windows is this, David? Is this like Windows
XP.
95 or XP? Okay,
no, XP.
cool.
I was trying to get a compromise. XP I could install the most versions on, and I just didn't want to be continuously changing. So XP still rocks. XP is good. XP works. So another great feature. I'm not going to show too much here because it won't. But in the this version of Navision, with the debugger is basically the same as the one we're used to in the old Navision version 5, etc. But when you hit an error, if you were writing code and you got an error, when you open that object, the cursor went straight to the line causing the error. Now, I think we got that in, was it 16 or 17 they brought that back? But I'm not sure which one. Yeah, but we lost that for 15 years and it came back. Another thing here is that in the DOS version of Navision, in Code Unit 1, you had the ability, wrong one, you had the ability to put in global filters. So what that means, if the security filters that we've got nowadays, that we can add code and we can say that we want John to only be allowed to see orders from this particular customer. We had that in the original DOS version, and that got taken away. So another growth area that moved through. One thing we did have though, and this was whether it's good or bad, it depends on how you look at it, but I don't know if you noticed here, but if I drill down on here and look to the end, there's an entry here that I made today just testing for 1st of January 2020. This DOS version of Navision was fully Y2K compatible. So you're looking here at a product basically that evolved from 1985 that was already Y2K compatible. And as great as that sounds, it was actually a real disaster for us, because in 1999, when everybody was out there selling upgrades and consulting services to fix, we had nothing to sell because all our customers already had Y2K product, which was, well, how all that got about. So here we go there. Right, so next, and link code. Right, so what? Oh, wrong one. No, hang on. Sorry, I'm really bad with, what do you call this program? This horrible presentation
PowerPoint
program. I'm really terrible with PowerPoint, sorry. Yeah. So basically what we had is a very, a lot of features here that have kept going. So now let me just show some evolution of the product. So what is interesting is that the technology, even though it looks different, hasn't really changed. And as to the actual application side of it, that has changed quite a bit, but it's been very evolutional. There's not been many real revolutions. If we look at comparing versions 1 and how am I going to do this? That's all right. Yeah, that's going to be hard, isn't it? When we went from 1.1 to 1.3, there was quite a lot happened. We suddenly got a lot of new granules. So for years there hadn't been anything added, and suddenly we got all these new granules and modules. So this was one very big jump in functionality. And if we look at the versions, which is what I'm trying to get to, we will see that if we go through these different versions, some of these had quite a lot of changes, and so I'll just try and briefly give a rough idea of time frame of what particularly happened. From 3.5, we went to Windows, and there was a pre-release version of Windows. I don't have a copy of it. I don't think it was ever released. It was used as a preview version that ran on Windows 3.0. It was basically never released and pulled. We then had version 1.0, which was released only in Denmark, and I don't think I've ever even seen it. And the first version I ever saw was 1.0b, and that was the version that was designed for the upgrading. 1.1, 2, and 3 were where they started stabilizing it and getting the new functionality, and then version 2 came across. And what I'd like to talk about is 2.6. Version 2.6 of Navision came in 4 different versions, which was really quite a complete mess. So what had happened with 2.6 is that in the most of the world we had a plain version. The US had 3 versions. They had their own modified version which had payroll in it. They had an advanced distribution. They had a manufacturing, which caused quite a mess for the partner network because we weren't really able to work on one particular system. So that got us to the point where we started getting stable, and then we got the 3 series. And Mark, I think this is about where you came in, wasn't it? You came in at the end of 2.6, right?
No, I started with 1.1.
You did?
Yep.
So you remember all these days?
Oh yeah. I just don't remember the DOS version.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay. So then we went through and we got up to version, can't even keep the things on, 3.6.
I know that in those days when a new version came out, you would always look at which bitmaps have they added for the menu and everything. And there was this download that you could do from Navoc or MBS Online that had like a forum that displayed all the bitmaps that were added.
Yeah. It was hard to find because in the first versions the only way was just to do just go through bit by bit and keep tracking them all back. So what happened about now is other things. I'm just that there was some. I wanted to try and have a look at some of these quirks because now we have another one. If we go right back to the start, we see this button here. You remember this, Mark, right? This famous button, the print button. And this was really interesting because what does that button do? Let's have a look. Let's go here to reports. There's a report, and I'll just print it. Oh, it doesn't do that. Okay, maybe I'll go to a sales order. Maybe I'll go to my post invoice. That's right, and I'll print my invoice. No, it doesn't do anything. So this print button caused no end of grief because it was in there. Then eventually, after long discussions, we found out that the reason is that in the Microsoft guidelines, it says that for a program to be Windows certified as made for Windows, it must have a print button. It doesn't say that the print button has to do anything, but it has to have a button. So that little button there has been there since the very, very beginning, and it wasn't until I think, well, I'm not sure, but it was quite late before it actually did anything. And even when it came out and actually did do something, it didn't do very much. So that's been quite a challenge. So we get there, and I'm just trying to. It's really hard to sort of. I should have done this a different way. It doesn't matter. We're going to keep going. So the next thing I wanted to have a look at in the way the product has evolved. We've seen. I'm sure all of you have seen this construct here. You can't do that, can you? The find equals less than and greater than and less than. And we see it even, I think, around version 4 it started to vanish, but it was still hanging around for most of the versions. Mark, can you remember when they stopped using that?
No, I don't.
Okay. So a lot of people have asked what that's for, and it's really actually the explanation that we were told it was introduced in the DOS version. The reason is quite simple, is that Navision at the DOS version, as you know, the server specifically wrote direct to disk. It controlled everything. It bypassed the controllers. It was very fast because it did everything directly. And it was designed so that when the heads were spinning, it would know where the head was when it was looking for data. And if it was on a record, the equals means it would find the current record, the record that is nearest, and it would grab it. If not, it would search, go forward till it gets the next one, and if not, it would hunt around and find the last. So if you have a list of 20 lines on a journal and you want to post them, you would say equals. The equals would say, well, my system is looking where this particular record is, let's find it and grab it. So the whole reason for that was simply for performance in the DOS version. But by the time we got Windows controls the disk. You had no control of them, which means this functionality has no meaning whatsoever in any version after the DOS version. Yet it's stayed around there for a long, long time. So,
isn't it still there?
Right. I think it's still there in some places because they just haven't gotten rid of it. That should be replaced with find minus or find set.
I'm looking at it.
It just hasn't.
I have NAV.
It has no.
I have NAV 2018 installed, and it's still there.
Really?
NAV 2018 still has it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's to get maximum performance off the disks when they're written there, and this would only work with RAID 1 and 10. It wouldn't work with RAID 5, I think it was. I can't remember which one, but it was very limited on what hardware it would work on. So there you go. There is a possibility it may have worked in earlier versions of the native database, but definitely in SQL it doesn't do anything. So that's a good one. This is the list of questions I'm going through that were asked. One of the questions that was also asked about is from the start, why is Navision so denormalized? Why is everything duplicated and put everything there? And that's really actually very simple. It's simply because it was an OLAP and it was online transaction processing and an online reporting database all in one. So it had to be there to be able to do the reporting. There's no joins or anything in the old database. So that's why we are stuck with having everything duplicated everywhere. Now, the next thing that came in 3.7, are we in 3.7? Yeah. Okay, 3.6, 3.7. 3.7 was really good. Was in terms of the native database, it was the most fully developed version, I would say. It was rock solid. They got everything sorted out. Everything was decided where it should go, and it worked very, very well. It was, unfortunately, appalling with SQL. It's Mark, as you would know. I think you made a lot of money out of 3.7. So it had some big mistakes. But one of the big introductions that came in was this idea that now we could why are these always so small? It's here somewhere. Where is 3.7, right? Auto increment. Where did auto increment come in?
Oh yeah, auto increment.
Yeah, it came in 3.7.
You have to have an integer field.
Yeah, integer. Yes, yes, yes. That's better. Right. There we go. Auto increment. When auto increment came in, this was basically this with GUIDs. This was conceptually where there were going to be some major changes to the design of the application, which was the reason we were told anyway that this was brought in. Although it was only first implemented on the changelog, the reason for auto increment was supposed to be so that we could get rid of the idea of entry number on our tables. And had again, like a lot of other things, it was a good idea that was put in place, but unfortunately, it never came about. So, unfortunately, that gets stuck there, stayed there, and nothing more happened, unfortunately. So
yeah, they only started to really use it in NAV 2016.
Yeah, it took them a long time.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that is a bit of a problem because we have a lot of things that came in and didn't get done. One of the more interesting ones, actually, is this. If I go here in version, this will do, Object Designer. If I go in here, we have this remote server number. Do you remember this, Mark?
No.
Yeah, this was something that.
Oh, Dave, we lost sound on you.
Sorry. There'd always been talk that we needed to get rid of the native database and at least have other options. There were, in Iceland, some big customers using Infomix. There was talk of some customers on Oracle, and this was basically in the DOS version. So this is native database, by the way. This is not SQL. This is native database. So when you press F1, it gets this message. Oh, there's a delay. Okay. This property is with the optional Cplex driver. Anyone ever installed Cplex? I don't know if anyone did, but I had a customer that had they had a service database on SQL version 6.5, and we wrote them an interface to Navision using Cplex. And unfortunately, we found out that Cplex was never actually a product. It was just a theoretical concept, which I've heard since, maybe rumor, that Microsoft killed because it would have allowed Navision to run on Oracle and Infomix, but who knows?
Oh. Okay.
So this was available in 1995, so we could have been started experimenting with SQL in 1995 if they'd released this Cplex tool. So one of the other ones. The next thing that came and died is not died. Let's just say never got used properly. Is temporary variables. So when temporary variables came along, we were originally told, and again, being told doesn't mean it's necessarily true, but when we asked Navision, why are you doing this? Temporary tables were to speed up code units 12 and 22 and 880. So the idea was that your machine would be piled up with RAM, and then when you were posting your journals, everything would be read into RAM, into the client, into temporary tables, posted and moved on. But unfortunately, never happened. So the temporary tables got sort of put off to side and never moved. Now, what this led to, though, is that because the idea was they wanted to move a lot of code into temporary tables, you couldn't use the same structure as your existing tables, because in the early versions you couldn't sort on a temporary table. So the idea was you just create a new table for every temporary table you're going to use. It didn't take much space. It was just a structure and design. So a small quirk left over of that was that obviously they couldn't charge for tables. So the license basically in a Navision wouldn't check for a license until you did an insert into the actual database. And that answers the question you had a few weeks ago, Mark, about why temporary tables don't check the license, the FLF license. And that is so that you would be able to use them without limit to write high-performance code.
Yeah, and now they are totally used in a different way with the design patterns and the clean code stuff.
All changed, all changed. Yeah, so good ideas that start and then don't get anywhere. So then we have, right, let me get the versions for database. Sorry, I didn't put SQL on this machine, and it's too, all right. Basically, we all know about security, that we have advanced security and standard security. Now, yeah, this will do. Wait 1 second. Let me just pull a different screen over. If I look here, File, Database, Alter, Standard and Enhanced. The Standard and Enhanced was really, really simple. The whole reason for it was because of SOX. When SOX come out, Navision was just getting brand new on SQL, and it wasn't really ready to do what it should be doing. And the way that Navision uses the XPO extended DLLs to control the security, for some companies wasn't acceptable. What they wanted was to be able to give security at the table level in SQL so that it could be done outside of Navision. Now the problem is, extended or enhanced security actually, by giving users direct access to the SQL databases, actually reduces security, because it means that now the users have permission to directly write to SQL databases directly, which was really bad. So unfortunately, the customers all believed, oh great, standard security enhanced will give me better security, whereas it actually gives them less security. And of course, the performance was just an absolute nightmare. And if we remember the disaster when in 4.0 Service Pack 1, it was mandatory to do enhanced, and the mess that created, which, well, we remember those days, don't we?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. There's a couple other questions. I'm just a bit nervous of time, so I'm not going to be able to. I'm just going to cut out a couple of the things that I've got on my list here, and I want to just quickly. There's a lot of talk about the Navision database. That yeah, it did die, and it had to die. It had a lot of issues and had a lot of problems with it, but it did have a few things. Cplex would have been a great solution if we'd been able to have that. It would have given it a lot more life. Background reindexing, now I don't know how far they got with this, but I know that they were experimenting with it, that basically Navision would write the primary index and the remaining indexes would work in the background, means you could post, commit, and move on. Filtered index, so basically when you've got open entry, you could just say don't index the rest of that, which I think SQL didn't have until 2008 or 2012, not sure where, it might have been, anyway, quite a while. But what really killed the native database was the lack of NAS, the ability to actually read and write and access the database outside of Navision. So just to answer the question, because I know a few people are asking about the what happened to the database. So what we had was that Navision really was a complete product that that went from start to finish. And I'm going to try and just wind up now, because I do have quite a few more questions or things that go through, but we're getting towards the end of time. Does anyone have any questions they want to address before we run out?
No, we have 15 minutes left, Dave. And there's not a lot of questions.
Okay. Good. Okay, so let me go
Take your
back here
time.
then.
Take your time.
All right.
Yeah, are you also familiar with the story that the NAS was originally created as a bet between two NAV developers?
No.
One
sounds
said
interesting.
one said it could be done, and the other one said it could not be done, and it was actually the guy from Iceland that created the NAS in a weekend, and he won the bet. But after the weekend, they had to spend 2 years fixing it.
Well,
Chris Robinson did it. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. We had a client in the US that had a need for basically a NAS, and what we ended up doing is we used if you remember when the on-timer came out, on-timer would have been, I think, version 2.01, I think. I haven't got that here, but when on-timer came out, we basically, it moved Navision to another level because we could actually do proper batch processing, which you couldn't really do. It was really hard to get any sort of time. Anything you did, if you do a batch with a loop and a delay, it crashed and failed. But the on-timer was a really nice, reliable way of running code in the background. So we were able to basically emulate what NAS does by simply, well, emulate, we did it years before NAS, by simply having an on-timer running a code unit that you could put your functions into a table, and then you use cfront to populate the data. So you'd populate the table, and that worked fine. So I'm not sure why they had to have so many problems with NAS, because the technology was already there. We ended up having a system for a client in 2.01 that would take data from a Macintosh-based front end, dumps that into a file which Navision would read, create sales orders, post from the sales order, it'd post data off onto a Unix system, and if it failed, it would send an SMS to you letting you know it had crashed. And we did all that with 2.01 technology. So I think sometimes it makes sense what you just said, because it was not really designed and thought out. It was just thrown together overnight. It went that way. But you know, it's sometimes it's a pity. But as I said, the biggest shock for me in putting this presentation together, I was expecting to be inundated with these thousands of all these different things, but it quite amazed me. You know, you conceptualize in your mind that something was more than it was and things happen. It really was an incredibly simple system. It did very, very little, but it did everything you needed. There's no real difference. Even if I go and have a look at this version here and I compare it to 2017, it does most of the same stuff. Yeah, sure, you can do stuff a lot faster and a lot better, but it hasn't really changed that much. And I sometimes wonder if that's a good thing or not. Sorry, what?
So on one of your slides, you had Project Green. Is there anything you wanted to share about that? Because those were interesting days, right? Those were days when we had rumors, and what are they doing? And
so, yeah, these were, to me, this were like the milestones for Navision through my lifetime, or where I saw it. And I only saw Project Green once. I don't know if you've actually seen it. It was
no, but the only thing I know is that Microsoft bought Navision, and this whole internal thing started. Navision was basically at a standstill until all of a sudden the 3-tier stuff came out.
Yeah, Project Green killed Navision for a long time. I mean, they lost a lot of sales simply because people thought something magic was coming and they waited for it. They stopped everything they were doing because Project Green. So when I saw Project Green, it looked a lot like Visio, where the developer tool was like little blobs, and you could drag and drop icons onto one another. And I saw a nice demo when, you know, afterwards I sat down with the developer, and he showed me how he could add a new, you know, I told him what I wanted to do was add a field to the sales line that comes from the item number. So on the item card, you'd have a field that would transfer to the sales line, and it would print in a report. And he did it without writing any code, all using drag and drop. So conceptually, it was really good. I mean, that was 2004, 13 years, and it just died. And I have no idea why it died. But
the story that I heard is that there was this guy, Pavel Ruby, working at Microsoft. And the idea was to use design patterns, you know, the repeatable stuff in NAV, to just generate code based on the design patterns. And the project died But this Pavel Ruby guy, he actually continued with it, and he created an ERP system based on design patterns. And we actually involved him in the design patterns project a few years ago. So it was quite an interesting thing to hear.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, that's the thing. I think the biggest problem they did with Project Green was to try and merge 3 products together, and they should have done then what they should be doing now, and that is to scrap it and restart. Because, as I said, I was really shocked to find out how little has changed from 1990 to 2017 in Navision. The code is still the same. It's still there. The blocks of code, the copy-paste code is all in there. Yeah. The way it's working.
It's basically the user interface. If you look at Navision for the last 25 years, the code is the same, functionality is the same, CAL is the same, but the UI has been increasingly more complicated, and most of the business logic that they add is displaying stuff. And the old Navision guys were really against programming against UI, because that would create so much business logic that was not really business logic. It was just stuff that controlled the UI.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Whereas here you
we have a good question here from Imran. Is that what happened to the developers toolkit? They kind of died, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I started to take I think that we put too much emphasis on programming and development in Navision. We should be focusing more on design and implementation and the business logic behind it all, and using the product we've got rather than trying to spend a lot of time. So, yeah, the toolkit. The Navision Developer Toolkit started with a company in Germany that wrote it and then sold it to Navision and got it. I don't even know. It was a very complex story of what happened. But I think that ultimately it's very strange if you consider the money Microsoft invests into technology that they then throw away again. Why not at least give it a go? But it seemed to me more that they didn't continue further because they want to get this into Visual Studio. That's the ultimate aim, is to get it into Visual Studio for no other reason that the only way you're going to get 20-year-old developers to get into Navision is if you've got it in Visual Studio. Not because it's better, simply because it's sexy. And so invest in that. And they should have, the NDT should have just bought it as is, made it available to everybody. We had it, then it vanished. We had it, and then it vanished. It was very strange. Even today, except for using Per Monson's tools, how else do you find out where an index is used exactly? It's there's a lot. There should be something standard in Navision to do that. But as I said, one of the thing that's got me most, and I've never thought of it because I've always thought, well, why do you do this? You have to do it this way because it's the Navision way. And it's become. I know that it's been a religion to me, but doing the presentation for this, preparation for this presentation has led me to believe that you can see there are a lot of areas that need to be gone, and they need to learn from these lessons. If you don't learn from your history, it will repeat itself. So, if we look at the transition from here to here, no. Where's my...
All these versions, Dave.
This one, yeah. Right. So, getting from there to there, we had an upgrade toolkit, and really they spent a lot of work to make this upgrade toolkit. Now, I've done a lot. I had a lot of customers in the DOS version, and moving to the Windows version, I told you, I made a conscious decision. I told all of my customers I can't support 2 products completely different like this. So either I'll give you 12 months of support on the DOS version. In that time, upgrade to the Windows version, or I will find you another partner that can take you over and focus. And the market did split. We had a lot of partners that focused just on the old version and others on the new. And part of that was the upgrade toolkit. The upgrade toolkit, though, was, if you remember the upgrade toolkit to convert Navision 5 to RTC, it was horrid. It was just unusable. It was more work to set it up and configure it than it was to do the upgrade. Even if you're doing...
And the reports is still a nightmare.
Yeah, and the problem is the same thing you get. They tell us that the reason the report designer isn't as good is because they invested all their time in the upgrade toolkit. So they've done it once, they've done it twice, and now we're going to get a new... We're doing it again, obviously, going to 365 because it is going to be a new way of doing things. We need to focus on getting the technology of the product. Let's not worry about the upgrade. We'll get there. We'll make it upgrade. We'll start again, and we'll bring all the data across. You know,
yeah, and if you see what Michael and Jacob did with 4NAV, I mean, it's
exactly.
just two developers. It's just, and you can see it is possible. It is possible. You know, it's just crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Why isn't 4NAV? You know, why don't they have that in Navision? Anyway, good for Michael, but it would have been better. So where I see now is happening is that we're doing it again. We're coming along and we're using excuses. And the biggest story I'm hearing right now that concerns me is the one we're hearing that why do Navision developers need access to the code when if you look at any other product out there, any product you want, they have triggers, they have add-ons that don't touch the base code and it works fine. How come everyone else needs it but the Navision developers need this something special? But unfortunately, it's not the Navision developers, it's the product. With every other product, the product was designed from the beginning to be a closed product. Therefore, it was designed at the very beginning to work that way. Navision never was. From the very beginning, Navision was designed to be a customizable and modifiable product. But I remember when I first went to the UK and Navision just was releasing the Navision Financials 1.1, and they did a survey at their first annual meeting and asked all the customers what was the top 10 reasons for buying Navision, and the #1 reason was flexibility and ability to change the code. Now, a year later, they did the same survey of those same customers, and they asked the different question. They asked, they asked that question, but they also asked the question, what is the biggest disadvantage of Navision? And the #1 thing was the flexibility and ability to change code. So, yeah, it's what built the product, but it's also, it isn't going to work going forward. They have to address this. If they want to survive this transition to 365, we need a finished product, which means we need to close the doors, and it needs to, code unit 80 needs to be just scrapped, start again, make it more efficient. Basically, keep all the tables in Navision, throw everything else out, and get it going. Because we've seen all these years, we're holding on to this stuff. We're holding on to stuff that has no value. We still have find equals greater than less than. It's for the DOS version. We don't need it anymore. We've got all these different things. We've got this print button. Oh, here's another one. Look at this. You can't see. See the screen here? Do you see those dots?
Mm-hmm.
It turns off the date, time, percentage of database. This information is turned off on the DOS and OS2 versions of Navision. This came in 3.5. It took us ages to find this out until I was in Denmark talking with one of the developers. The reason turns out that in the Unix version of Navision, all that data is transferred across the network, which means every second there's a ping updating the time. So that was using network traffic. So to save the network traffic on the Unix version, they wanted to turn that out. So I asked, well, why do it on the DOS version? And they said the reason is they want to be consistent across all platforms. So I have 90% of customers running on DOS and OS2 have this thing going off all the time and asking, why does the date keep turning off? Sometimes you need to throw the old stuff out. You really do need to say, it's a great product. I mean, Navision 2009 is a great product, but we're moving on to something new. We've been hanging on to this stuff for too long, and honestly, it's time to let go, let the babies out, and start again. So
we have 1 minute left, and there's at least 2 or 3 questions that I quickly want to address. Okay. Dimitri is asking what happened to table 12. He saw table 12 being the project table, and I think table 11 was the department. That was the old way of doing dimensions, right?
Dimensions, yeah. Yes, dimensions changed. Quite a bit did vanish. If I can just quickly show a couple of things that have vanished. Where in here, table. So these were dimensions. This was global dimension 1 and global dimension 2 were in a separate table.
Yeah. Had nothing to do with the project module. It was just called project.
No, just called projects. But also table. Oh no, what's going on here? Sorry. I got these here. Also table. This was table 130 item groups. Item groups were basically items that didn't have quantity. So basically anything you didn't need to count the quantity of, your networking cables or services, work you did, could all be done as an item group. It was brilliant, and it vanished for no reason, just one version, it was just gone. 1 minute it was there, gone. Another thing in this old version, you could purchase resources, which was wonderful if you do services and you want to purchase them and resell them. So, yeah, Dimitri, some of those tables are gone for a good reason, some for a bad reason. 12 and 13 have no value anymore because of dimensions changed, but a few other things that have vanished could have been there.
Yeah.
What was the last question?
I think we're out of time. There is one question about why the keywords if and then are capitalized when other programming languages have them in small caps.
Oh, I mean, all of it was based on Cooney and Ritchie Pascal. So it was just they looked at the Pascal books and copied it.
Yeah. I know that in VS Code, in the new development environment, are going to make it small caps. Mm-hmm. Okay, Dave, we are out of time. I think it was a very interesting webinar. I think it will hopefully give people who come into our community some insights in where Navision comes from, and the fact that the customer table, the vendor table, the item table, all of that has a long history. I know that NAV 2018 will have, I think, 600 or 700 events that you can subscribe to. I hope that Microsoft is going to do a good job in documenting these events so that we can move away from making code changes to the Navision code, and it will give Microsoft some time to start refactoring these old codes and get some of this old coding habits out of the system. And while Microsoft is doing that, we'll continue evangelizing modern coding, and we don't want to see. Every time I do a workshop, I tell people we're going to do a ceremonial burial. We're going to bury the code function. I don't want to see a function anymore which is called code. It's just a very nasty old habit.
Yeah,
okay.
Only if you're upgrading from DOS, but hell, you may have customers upgrading from DOS to 2017.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks, Dave. David. Bye.
Bye.